Hello, Paul. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Susanna. Thanks for having me.
All right. So you kind of alluded to this happening maybe a few weeks ago. So it's been something that's been brewing. But how did this eventually and finally get over the line?
Well, I think Gregg Berhalter was evaluating his options as you'd expect. And certainly I think there was interest for Berhalter in going overseas to Europe and potentially trying to break in and coach there. But Chicago Fire is quite a convenient fit for him. He already lives in Chicago, so there's no need to move himself or his family. And I think the Chicago Fire is a unique opportunity. He's given full control, so full power over sporting operations and coaching. And this is a job that has a lot of security, which is a rarity in the soccer world. We just saw Georg Heitz, the former sporting director of the Fire. He stepped away after 5 seasons of not making the playoffs. This wasn't a situation where he was fired. So you have an owner in Joe Mansueto who is a patient owner, who's willing to give someone time to try to set up a winning program, or even in the case of Heitz, maybe not a winning program. And I think that's incredibly rare in the sports world. And then you've got Chicago itself. This is a market that is desperate for a good soccer team. The Fire have been probably the worst franchise in MLS over the last 15 years, just one playoff appearance over the last 12 seasons, and they need help. And Chicago Fire now has a coach who has had success in Major League Soccer, and I think will get an opportunity for the first time to build a team on a more robust budget than what he had under Anthony Precourt. So a lot of reasons for Berhalter to stay, and I think ultimately, the big question is for the Fire is it worth the risk of giving somebody total control of soccer operations?
Paul, I guess I'm a little confused because it seems like the majority of the world, the footballing world, is moving away from this model, the omnipotent manager model, especially in MLS, where you're starting to see, I think, more advancement in committees and people handling. Can one person handle all this? Was this because of maybe the ineptitude of a Chicago Fire, maybe to go and find options at those other roles? Or do we see a future where maybe Gregg steps into more of the director role and hires a different manager, or he's going to handle it all?
No, I mean, I agree with everything you said in regards to MLS being a bigger league now. It's too difficult to do both jobs and do it as well as your competition. If you're the Chicago Fire, what you have to be asking yourself now is, can Gregg Berhalter be as good as the director of football as John Thornton and as good of a coach as Steve Trundle at LAFC? That's who you're competing with, right? So you have to be able to do both jobs equally well. The question for me is, who is Berhalter going to bring in under him in the sporting department? Who's going to be in charge of scouting for the first team, putting that roster together? Who's going to be in charge of handling the budget, working with Major League Soccer on the salary cap, those types of things? I think you will see Berhalter build out an entire department, and there will be somebody who I think is sort of in that Mike Burns' role in Sporting Kansas City, or I guess what Brian Bliss used to be under Peter Vermees, who is in charge kind of that day-to-day sporting operations part while Gregg Berhalter is coaching. But Sporting Kansas City did change that system, right? They did go away from having somebody under Vermees and brought Mike Burns in, who is on equal footing to Vermees. So I think that's an indication of just how difficult it is to kind of be a coach who's worried about the short term and also be managing the medium and the long term with that idea of what is best for the roster, not just this season, but next season and the year after that and the year after that. That's the tough task for Gregg Berhalter. Why would the Fire do this? I think the answer is simple. They haven't made the playoffs over the last 5 seasons. They made the playoffs just once in 2017, going all the way back to 2012 was the previous time that they made the playoffs. I think the baseline here is they need to start winning, becoming a playoff team, having some level of consistent good results. And so I think, hire somebody who you believe can lift the floor of this franchise much, much higher than where it's been. Gregg Berhalter is a process-oriented hire. This is the way he's been as a coach of the national team. It's the way he was in Columbus. So if you have a belief that Berhalter can be a massive upgrade over what you've had before, I think that's probably the starting point for the Fire. But it's fair to ask these questions of, could you have gotten Berhalter as a coach and gone and hired somebody else as a sporting director? That's a fair ask. And now Gregg Berhalter is going to have to be able to prove that he can manage both jobs. It's going to be critical who he hires as technical director or whatever the title is, that the person that's putting together that first team roster and who's handling the day-to-day of the sporting department.
Well, it seems all bleak in Chicago. How do you rate this job? Because I look at it, got a great owner, You have a brand new training facility somewhere near downtown. It can only go up if you're a manager, right? And they will spend some money. So how do you? It looks like you haven't made the playoffs in 5 years. It's a terrible job, but I would think as a manager, there's a lot to be attracted by. There's a lot of attractive stuff in this position.
For sure. I mean, you nailed it. If you're Gregg Berhalter, this is a great job. Again, you've got an owner who's willing to spend money and has been one of the higher spending owners since taking full control of the team in 2019, spent tens of millions of dollars in the transfer market. You've got the new training facility that's opening in the spring or summer in Chicago, which I think drastically changes what this franchise looks like. They've been out training in Bridgeview at the old stadium where they still sometimes play. You've got job security, right? Again, Joe Mansueto has proven to be a patient owner, which is something that you're never guaranteed in sports. And I think you also have a really attractive market. People want to come and play and live in Chicago. That helps in recruitment. And I think also from someone who lives in Chicago, if you know this market, it is hungry for soccer. There are huge audiences here that are willing to come and watch the team if you can put a good product on the field. The Fire haven't put a good product on the field in a really long time. That is Gregg Berhalter's task. If you put an attractive team on the field that plays attacking, fun football, people will come watch. I was there in 2017 working on the sidelines as a sideline reporter when Bastian Schweinsteiger came in. They had David Accam, Nemanja Nikolic won the Golden Boot. They were filling the stadium every week. They finished third in MLS. That's the potential. Of course, the next year they went back down and missed the playoffs, and you lose any sort of momentum. But this is a very attractive job. I think there was a lot of interest in it. And now Gregg Berhalter has a chance to kind of make it in his own image. And I think that will be the most interesting part. Can he replicate some of the success he had in Columbus? This is a different league. This is a different job. He didn't have a big budget to sign DPs in Columbus. That's going to be a new part of the task. There were no U22 signings when he was the manager in Columbus and sporting director. Finding and recruiting and signing those players is going to be a new task. This is a bigger market than Columbus. The expectations now, I think, are different. They're a little bit lower. I think that's attractive too for Gregg Berhalter. Anywhere that you go is probably up. But, you know, it is a more challenging job, in my opinion, and we'll see how successful he is here in Chicago.
Tenorio, be honest with me, please. What is Chicago going to do to bring back Xherdan Shaqiri and turn him into the DP that everyone thought he was?
Stop it, Nico.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's turning Shaqiri into a successful DP, but I think that's a great point, though, in just that Shaqiri was here. Before him, Schweinsteiger. You can go and recruit big-name players who will want to come and live and play in Chicago. I think that's an important part of the equation here. You have to be a bit smarter in how you spend this money, but the money is there to spend. And in this league, this is a DP-driven league. If you get your DPs right, you're going to be successful. Just look at the LA Galaxy. You know, last year they were not a good team. They really struggled. This year they were in the fight for the Supporter Shield. What changed? They went and signed 2 DPs, Peck and Paintsill. That completely overhauled what this team looks like. The Chicago Fire are going to have 2 DP spots open for next season. They have a chance to kind of replicate what the Galaxy did. Go sign a difference-making number 10. Go sign a winger who can actually beat players one-on-one and create goals. You have a $10 million striker already. This doesn't have to be a long-term fix. You know, this isn't necessarily going to be a team like the Galaxy that's contending right away next year. They have a lot of other holes to fill. They've got to sign 2 center backs. They've got to sign a right back, a midfielder. There's a lot to do if you're the Chicago Fire. Probably too much to be a contender next year. But with those 2 DP spots and the way MLS works, you can become a successful team next year. You got to get those right. You absolutely have to get those right. And the Chicago Fire have not gotten their DPs right in a very long time.
That's 100% facts. Okay, Paul, I'm very curious to ask about the guy who is the current head coach in Frank Klopas, who apparently is going to step down at the end of this regular season. How is this kind of presented to him? And it seems like he is still going to be a part of this organization, as he has been for many years. But what were the conversations like with Frank regarding this whole situation?
Yeah, I think it speaks to Frank's loyalty to the organization. I mean, he's worked in pretty much every single role you can work in a club. He's been the sporting director at the Fire. He's been the head coach. He worked as a color commentator on the broadcast. He was an assistant coach. He served as interim manager twice over the last 4 years before being named the full-time manager. Yeah, he's done it all. He's done it all.
Yeah,
this is a Chicago
Soldier Field for 2 days while the sign was being fixed.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's from Chicago. He lives here. He doesn't want to leave here, and I think he was willing to step down to accommodate this move as long as he could still work in the club. And I think what Frank does with the team, I think will be a little bit of everything. As working in the sporting department, along with Gregg Berhalter, it's working on the first team, it's working on the second team, it's working in the academy. It's doing something he's done for the team for a long time, which is kind of being one of the faces of the club, going out to different events and representing the Chicago Fire. But I think Frank Klopas understood when he took the job as head coach last year, this wasn't a long-term position for him. Frank's been around for a really long time. He wanted to do what he could to help the Chicago Fire. But I think he kind of understood, too, in the long term, they need to go and find the right person to lead this club for the next 5-10 years. And so with this opportunity with Gregg Berhalter, I think a lot of people at the Chicago Fire felt like it was a perfect fit and a coach who could turn the team around. And Frank Klopas was willing to step aside and say, look, I want to help in any way I can. That's been his attitude for as long as I've known him. And I think that was the case again here with this hire and his change of role with the Chicago Fire.
Good old Frank. Yes or no, Paul? Chicago Fire makes the playoffs next season.
Oh, man, there's so much to figure out. Look, I think that they will get their DP signings right, and I'll predict, yes, they will make the playoffs next year.
All right, we'll hold you to it. We'll roll back the tape. Yeah. I look forward to that. Paul Tenorio, great stuff as always. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right, guys, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to continue this Gregg Berhalter to the Chicago Fire conversation. Don't go anywhere.